Okay, so we're going to be talking about sigma notation or summation notation. And this looks much scarier than it actually is. And the reason why we call it sigma notation is because we use this letter sigma to represent what we're talking about here. And what are we going to be talking about? We're going to be talking about a summation. And what does the word summation make you think of? Hopefully this word makes you think of something right away. It's adding a bunch of stuff together. Okay, so we're going to be adding the terms in a sequence together is mostly how we think about it. So let's take a look at this. So we know that it's going to have this letter sigma, and the sigma really stands for the idea of summing. So let's see what we're going to sum up. So the first thing that you'll see when you have one of these sigma notations is a little notation down here. Oftentimes they use I, you could use an N or the J, you could use whatever letter you want. We call this one the index. And what that is it tells you basically what letter we're using to represent the independent variable or the thing that's going to change, the thing that we're going to input. And it's standing here for, if you're thinking about it like a sequence, usually we're thinking about it as the term number. Okay, so if you want to think about it like a sequence, it's like the term number when we're talking about it. So term 1, 2, 3, 4, that number, not the actual term value. This one here tells us the lower bound. So this one tells us to start at the first term. In other words, this could be some other number, but this one happens to be saying number 1, so start at the first term. Then we usually have up here, we usually use N or some other. If you use N down here, you got to use a different letter up here. This one stands for the upper bound. And that one will tell you when you're going to stop adding. And this here, so we'll just call this A sub I guess, for now. This thing represents the, well, I'll say the formula for the sequence that you're going to add up, or the equation for the sequence that you're going to add up. So it's going to make a whole lot more sense when you see it with a number. It's actually, like I said, looks a lot scarier than it really is. So let's take a look at one. So I'll use the I, and we'll start with term number 1, because a lot of the ones that we're going to be doing will start at term number 1. And if you're writing your own sequence, oftentimes it's beneficial to start at term number 1. You can actually start at term number 0 even, or like I said, some other number, but usually it's a 1 because a lot of times you're writing these yourself. I'll put a 5 up here, which means our upper limit is 5, which means what I'm going to be doing here, if I'm thinking about this like the table that we did before, this is term 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what I'm going to do is that once I know what these term values are, I'm just going to add them together. Okay, so let's take a look at an equation. It doesn't matter which one we use. Let's say this. Okay, so the I is telling us that that's the thing that we're going to change. So what this is actually saying is it says start at the first term, whatever the first term would be for this sequence, and add all the way up to the 5th term. So it looks like this. That would be my first term. I would add my second term. So my second term would be with a 2 in there. Then I would add my third term. That would be with a 3 in there. And I should have picked something smaller that would have fit on the sheet. But that's the way it goes. And then I'm going to add my 5th term. So this is really what it stands for. It says put a 1 in, figure out what that value is, put a 2 in, put a 3 in, put a 4. That one's a 4. Put a 5, and then add those values together. Okay? So again, what was this term? It was a 5. That's a 4, 7. So you can see that these are going up by 2. So do you see how this is an arithmetic sequence or a linear equation? So that would be a 9, an 11, and a 13. Okay, and it's adding all of these up. That would be the value of this thing. So let's do that quickly. So what's this? 12, and that one's 20. and 13. So 5, 2, 3, 4. So this whole thing, I'll do it on this side because I ran out of space on this side, is equal to a 45. This asks me, what's the value of adding up the first 5 terms of this sequence, right? That's not very scary once you know what it means. So let's just look at 1 or 2 more just so that we know what we're talking about. Like I said, you can start at some other number. So let's start at, say, I don't know, 7 and go up to the 10th term. So what would this one be? We'll use that same sequence, just it doesn't matter what this is. Whatever this thing is, you're just going to put the same numbers in. So this one says put a 7 in, is my lower bound. So I'm starting at term 7, and I'm going all the way up to term 10. So I'll be adding together 4 terms, and again, I should have maybe held my paper the other way. So this is what we're actually talking about here. And all we would have to do is simplify all of these. So let's just take a quick peek, actually, since maybe this is a good place to show you how you might do this on your calculator. You ready? So if you have your calculator, take it out. Now, some of you, if you have a fancier one, you actually have this little sigma notation. If you have maybe an more old-timey one like I have, you might not have that one. So how will you know if you do? Hit the math button and scroll through these little commands and see if you see one that looks like the sigma. So you can see that I don't have that. So what am I going to do instead? All right, so I am going to go to, all right, so I'm going to go to the list. So if you look at this, let me see if I can turn it so you can kind of see in the light. I hit my second button and this stat button, and it took me to this screen. Okay, so I'm going to do, this is going to be the sum of a sequence. All right, so this one is standing for sum, this one is a sequence. I'm summing up a sequence. So when I go to my calculator, that's actually what I'm going to do. And hopefully you can see right here under, if I just scrolled over with my arrows to get to this one, this ops, and there's a sequence, but there's no sum here. So if I go over to math, now I can see that there's a sum. So I can either hit the number 5 because it's 5 on my thing, or I can use my arrows to scroll down and hit enter. So basically that's like putting this sigma thing here. If yours already has a sigma thing and you pick it, you'll notice that there's actually just places to fill in. It looks exactly like this, and it's easy to fill in. Hopefully you can figure that out. All right, and then I'm going to go back to list because now I want to tell it that I'm summing up a sequence. And what's the sequence that I'm going to be summing up? It's this thing. But my calculator, I could use an I, but it's usually easier to use an X. So I'm using an X just like I would, you know, because if you looked at my arithmetic sequences one, you know, you can use X and Y to represent those things. All right, so I closed the sequence. Now, what am I going to do? I'm going to tell it where to start and where to stop. So I'm going to use my little comma, which is here next to the parentheses. And I'm going to tell it what I'm using as the variable. So I could have used something else, but I'm actually going to put the index in here. So what did I use? I used X. And then I put another comma, and I tell it to start at 7. So I put a 7 in. It's hard to see because the light's shining kind of weird today. And then I put another comma, and I put a 10. And so this tells me I'm going to sum up this sequence. I'm going to use X as the variable, and I'm going to go from 7 to 10. And let's see. So I have open parentheses, close parentheses. I should be good. Let's take a look. Oh, what did I do wrong? Oh, I put the parentheses in the wrong place. Did you see that? So this is the sequence. I'm going to go from 7 to 10, and this should be an 80. So we could check it by doing this one out, but maybe you don't want to do all of that. 18 plus 3. Let's do it out just to make sure that we're good. (17 plus 19 plus what's 18 plus 3? 21 plus 23. And there's my 80. Okay, so for these ones, we can do them on the calculator. We could do them out by hand. And I can use this for any kind of sequence. It doesn't matter what this formula is. I just have to tell the calculator what it is. I have to tell it where to start and where to stop. All right, but of course, these ones are easy enough to do out by hand. They're not that long. So either way.